Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm Ruth Shelley, President of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our live weekly membership meeting. As our banner says, Rotary opens opportunities to find solutions for today's challenges: healing from the pandemic, recovery from the economic downturn, and peace building as we seek racial justice. This week we focus on door number 2, recovery, or perhaps I should say transformation, as our speaker, Dr. Miles Davis, talks to us about the future of higher education. But first, let's welcome Rotarian Carol Salter for our reflection. Carol?
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you today, and I want to pull up my reflection here. I saw that Dr. Davis was going to be speaking today, so I thought I would keep the reflection within the same parameters as that. As I reflect back on my own education, I often thought that experience was just as important as that piece of paper. I grew up pretty street smart. I worked full-time, had 6 children, and then I attended a local community college to find out that I loved learning. And later on in life, I was working full-time. I received my bachelor's degree, and then about 2.5 years ago, I received my master's degree because I continue to just love learning. And so today I have a new perspective that I would like to share with other people, that sometimes that piece of paper does have a lot to add to our lives. So I have 2 quotes that I want to talk about. I found 2 that really reflect what I'm thinking now with my new understanding. One is from Paulo I'm going to say his name wrong, probably, Freire, French, I think. Education does not change the world. Education changes people, and people change the world. I love that quote. And then the other one is from the Dalai Lama. When educating the minds of our youth, we must not forget to educate their hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. What a wonderful personal story and great quotes to remember. We have openings for the last 2 meetings of 2020. And so if any of you would like to give one of the reflections, please fill out the link provided in the chat box or email Siobhan. And now I'd like to ask that Rotarians who have invited a guest to raise your hand, and Maria or Kate will call on you to unmute and introduce them. Carol, I understand you have a guest to introduce.
I do. I'd like to introduce Jazeel Ormeno. She is one of our board members for Easter Seals Oregon.
Jazeel, welcome. We're so glad that you could join us. Are there any other guests or Rotarians who are joining us that would like to introduce themselves in the chat?
Well, I'm going to jump in, Ruth, and share that I see a guest who I've had the pleasure of getting to meet outside of Rotary, and I think it might be his 3rd time coming to a meeting, but Michael Castro is here with us from the Peace Corps. He joined us back when our guest was the Peace Corps speaker, and he's now back to his 3rd meeting. So welcome, Michael.
That's terrific. We're happy you're here, Michael. Again, thank you all for attending our meeting. And it is December 1st. I'd like to extend a happy birthday to everyone with birthdays this month. Of course, we alternate each week between birthdays and anniversaries. And the month of December is important to me because my birthday is in December. And I know how December babies tend to get overlooked with all of the holiday preparation. If you have an opportunity, take note of someone on this list and reach out to them with your greetings during the month. It's so hard for us to celebrate in our normal ways, but that note of remembrance will keep us all going as Rotarians during these challenging times. Happy birthday to all. And now, please welcome immediate past President Kate Ertman to make an announcement for Rotary Leadership nominations. Kate?
Thank you so much, President Ruth. Pursuant to Article 1, Section 1, Rotary Club of Portland bylaws, I, Kate Ertman, past president and nominating committee chair, along with the nominating committee, Wes Harper, Scott Lofton, Curtis Shirey, and past president Danielle Banks, have nominated the following Rotarians for club officer positions for 2021 to 2022. The Rotarians nominated have been notified and have agreed to accept the nominations as follows: Reid Miller as president, Maria Schell as vice president, and Terry Goldman as president-elect nominee. Pursuant to the bylaws, I declare that nominations are open for any additional nominations. All nominees must have served 1 year on the club board before assuming office and have given consent to be nominated. Are there any nominations at this time? We can have people raise their real or their virtual hand and signal that you have a nomination in the chat, and Maria can call on you. If you do this in the chat, just type the word nomination, since we will need you to make a statement using your voice, not just writing it in the chat. We'll pause here. Okay, seems like we may not have any nominations at this time, which is fine because we will be continuing this as the bylaws provide that at the club meeting on Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, next week, the nominations will remain open and I will call again for any additional nominations. The election of the club officers will be held on Tuesday, December 15th, 2020, during the club's regular noon meeting. On behalf of the nominating committee, I thank all of you for your support. And I now have a second related announcement. Over the past year, we have heard from members, especially new members, that have questions regarding things like this nomination process that I just announced, as well as questions on how a member can become a leader in our club and in Rotary, and where you can find this information. So when we recently updated our club's website, that information can now be read on the leadership team page on the site. Also, this year, we will be having a How to Become a Leader in Rotary information meeting. It's going to be held next week on Wednesday, December 9th at 4:30 p.m. and it will be on a video chat, of course, like this. There will be a link for the meeting in this Friday's spokes, so look for that. And I will get to co-facilitate the informational meeting along with past president and past district governor Danielle Banks. And I believe that between the two of us, we will be able to answer all your questions regarding the opportunities and qualifications that are needed to become a leader in our club, as well as in district and beyond. And since we have conveniently scheduled this meeting to be held in the time period that some refer to as happy hour, Danielle and I will welcome having some holiday cheer with you. We will also share some holiday cocktail recipes, and we just enjoy having some social time with our fellow Rotarians. So again, How to Become a Leader in Rotary information meeting next week, Wednesday, December 9th, 4:30 p.m. And if you read this Friday's spokes, you'll find out how to attend the meeting. Back to you, President Ruth.
Thank you, Past President Kate. Thank you for making the path to leadership more transparent for all of our club members. And now, speaking of holiday cheer, please welcome past President Rotarian Scott Burns to tell you about this year's bell ringing. Scott?
Thank you very much, President Ruth. And it's December again. And we have had, this is the 85th year of a tradition that our club has been having with bell ringing with the Salvation Army. And so we have had a meeting of our bell ringing committee the other day, but it's also a year of COVID. Not a very good year to be bell ringing, and especially there aren't a lot of people on the streets and the Hilton Hotel is closed down. And so we decided, just like everything else, to go virtual. And so we will be having a virtual red kettle that we'll be sending out to all members of our club. Siobhan will be sending that out maybe today or tomorrow. And we have worked this out with the Salvation Army. And so we will be doing fundraising. Last year, we raised in 90 minutes, $32,381, set the record with 83 people and 3 dogs. Well, this year, we aren't going to be physically doing that. And so this year, we're going to go virtual. And so we encourage people to give. There's a great need out there as the Salvation Army reaches out to the poor in our community. And you can either do it by using a credit card or writing a check. And everybody who contributes will get a receipt, which is very, very good for that. So thank you to the support of our club and continuing on with this tradition that we have got. And so thank you to you, Ruth. And also I would just like to say thank you to everybody in the club. Glenda and I, have had COVID. 18 days ago, we tested positive. The good news is it has been a mild case, but we have been quarantined at home, and we thank you very much for your prayers, and we feel pretty good at this particular time. Back to you, President Ruth.
Thank you, Scott. So glad that you and Glenda are recovering and that we can continue this wonderful tradition of the Red Kettle Drive. So please, when time comes, be generous because, as Scott mentioned, the need is greater than ever before this year. Now, please welcome President-elect Reid Miller to announce this year's Trust Drive. Reid?
Thank you, Ruth, and good afternoon, Rotarians. Well, it's our favorite time of year again. It's the time for giving. As Rotarians, it's in our blood to give, whether we give our time, our effort, or our money. It's what we do. With the holiday season upon us, it's time to fire up our annual Trust Drive. As Kate so eloquently said, this year I have the opportunity of running our annual Trust Drive. I'm very excited about this year's Trust Drive, and I look forward to seeing what we are made of. Just as the year 2020 has looked a little different, this year's Trust Drive will look a little different from years past. With the pandemic causing lockdowns and having a great economic impact across our entire country, we understand this year is different. With businesses closing and others being dramatically affected, it doesn't feel right to put the pressure on our members to give. We don't want you to feel badgered to donate at every Tuesday meeting or every Rotary email you receive. We understand that these are difficult times. This year, we'll be giving our members a bit more space to take part in the Trust Drive. You won't be receiving weekly requests for money. Instead, you'll hear from me only a few times over the course of this Trust Drive. This is the announcement of the Trust Drive beginning. You'll hear from me once or twice in the middle of the Trust Drive and again at the end. We are all responsible adults, and I don't think any of you need to be reminded a gazillion times over the course of a few months. After many years of the Trust Drive being our primary fundraiser, most of our members are very familiar with how and why to donate. With all the challenges 2020 has provided to our community and to the collective world, that gives us all the more reason to donate. This year, your donations are needed more than ever. Donations to the Trust Drive, say hello to my cat. Donations, excuse me. With all the challenges, donations to the Trust Drive are what funds our club and all the great things that we do in our community and abroad. We understand that times are difficult for many of you, and we do not want to put any additional burden on you. We are just asking that each of you donate what you can and what you're comfortable with. Our community needs us more now than ever. The Trust Drive will run through the end of January, which gives you the opportunity between now and January 31st to give to our club's trust. That's only 2 months, so I urge you to think long and hard about this year's gift to our club. Begin the discussion with your family now, and as a Rotarian, be proactive. I'm not going to set a goal to beat last year's donations, as we have in years past. This year, our goal is for everybody to participate and match last year's $189,000 in donations. Again, we don't want to burden our members. We just ask as Rotarians to do what you're comfortable with. If that means skipping a morning coffee a couple of times to donate $20, then we will thank you for that. Our goal is 100% participation, no matter how large or how small. I thank all of you very much for your thoughtful consideration of donating to this year's Trust Drive. As an added bonus, an anonymous member of our club has offered to donate an additional $5,000 if we are able to meet our goal of 100% participation. Please be a part of the solution and help us reach that goal. We already have nearly 100% participation from our club's leadership, board of directors, and the Trust Board of Directors. Now it's time for our members to do what we do best. Pledges and donations can be made on our website. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Siobhan. I thank you all for listening, and I thank you very much for doing your part.
Thank you, Reid, and thank you for your sensitivity to giving during this challenging time. Now, it's time for our breakout room. We're going to disappear and enter a virtual table talk. Please introduce yourselves to the others in your group, especially to our guests. A minute or so before you come back to this main meeting, you'll get a visual heads up. And may I suggest a topic for your discussion? Perhaps over Thanksgiving, you connected with a college-age son, daughter, or grandchild. What has their pandemic college experience been like? Here we go. Now on to our program. We had the pleasure of Dr. Miles Davis being in our breakout room, and we got all warmed up for his presentation. After our speaker today is finished, if you'd like to ask Dr. Davis a question, Maria will moderate the Q&A through the chat box. And now please welcome back past President Rotarian Scott Burns as today's chair of the day. Scott?
Thank you very much, President Ruth. As an educator and a college professor, I love it when we get a president of a university to come and talk to us. And Dr. Miles Davis, oh, what a background he has got. We are in for a really, really good talk. First of all, he's at Linfield College, 162-year-old liberal arts college here in Oregon, down in McMinnville. Also has a place here in Portland for their nursing program. But they became a university this year. So we don't say Linfield College anymore. We say Linfield University. Great nursing school, great business school. They also have, I think, the top wine studies program in the United States, the Evanstad Wine Studies program led by my good buddy, Greg Jones down there. Dr. Davis has, and he's the 20th president in 162 years of Linfield being around. Dr. Davis not only has a bachelor's degree, he's got 2 master's degrees and a PhD from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He's a specialist in entrepreneurship. He's a business professor, but he does a lot of integrity, values, principles, and business type of teaching. Does faith-based entrepreneurship, leadership development. And then he applies it a lot also to higher education, organizational change, and then how that leads to principled leadership. And then he transfers that to higher education. In the state of Oregon, we have an organization called the Oregon Alliance of Independent Colleges and Universities. He has been elected by his peers as the chair of all of those universities. And then nationally, we have got the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, and he is on the board. So he's nationally and regionally very, very important. He has an incredible background. He's doing wonderful things at Linfield. He's going to talk about higher education in general. How about a welcome to Dr. Miles Davis? Thank you very much for coming and talking to us today.
There you go. I can actually unmute myself. Scott, I think I've decided that you and I should go on the road together. You can become my hype man as I go out and speak because you got that passion and energy. So we can do this together, Scott. I'm glad to hear that you're recovering from COVID. So many challenges with so many out there. What I want to do is take a few minutes to talk about higher education in general. Spend a little bit more time talking about higher education within an era of a pandemic, and then spend a little bit of time talking about the transformation of Linfield University and what it is we're doing. The challenge with higher education is that even though we are supposed to produce these people who bring innovation and progress, education itself, and higher education in particular, is very wrapped in tradition and is very calcified. Now, let me be clear. I say that out of a lot of respect for education, because education itself is transformative. Even when we find ourselves in times when people challenge the value of education. I love the conversation earlier about education as learning. we find ourselves within an era where we often talk about education from the perspective of going to school to get a job. To me, that is not the purpose of education. Now, that might sound crazy coming from a university president, but I have loftier ambitions for education, because a democratic republic, which is what the United States of America is, cannot stand if it doesn't have educated citizens. It cannot survive if it does not have people who have the ability to analyze, interpret, and listen to information, who cannot understand what is illogic, who cannot look at and apply levels of understanding that allow them to engage in discernment of what is happening in both the political arena, the economic arena, as well as the social arena. So it is important for us to get educated, not indoctrinated, but for us to get educated so that we have the opportunity to learn and to experience one another. There was a reason that ancient Romans and Greeks only allowed its citizens to become educated in certain things, where we get this term liberal arts from. Liberal arts comes from the Latin meaning liberalis artis, which means skills of free people. Soldiers were given rules as soldiers. There were people who were given defined rules, but citizens got to learn how to think. And it is through thinking and applied knowledge that you build and change societies. That's why it is so important. Unfortunately, as I started out with, we have become locked into a model of education that says that what is most important is the exchange, the didactic nature of knowledge and information. And so now we find ourselves having debates about the value of online education, particularly in a time of a pandemic. That is not where most of the education of our young people occurs. It is not within the classroom. The classroom will give you certain information, but the classroom does not help you mature and learn, nor does it give you the life skills to be able to deal with difference. Because in the United States, we are a unique experiment. And what I mean by that is this. The United States of America, to the best of my knowledge, I keep checking every time I get a chance to see what I'm saying is true. So I invite you to challenge me on this if it doesn't ring true for you. The United States of America is the only country I know that is not founded on one of the three things that normally unites a country. There is no dominant, well, there's a dominant, but there is no established ethnic group that founded this country. So you go to places like Japan, you go to places like China, you go to Korea, you go to Spain, there is an ethnicity that unites the people. That is not the case in the United States. There is no founding religion. Now, and again, it is not my intent to ever offend anyone, but I do think that there are such a thing as truth and facts, and they're not alternative facts, they're actually reality, is that the United States, in fact, was founded on the basis of freedom of religion. So thereby, we don't have an Anglican church, or nor is our official religion Confucian. There is no official religion in the United States. And even the common mythology that we talk about of this being a Judeo-Christian nation, that's problematic because the founding fathers were actually deists and actually persecuted Jews. So it's actually not an ideal that we are Judeo-Christian. There is no religion. And then the third thing that we have to think about within the context of a country is language. There is no official language in the United States. Thomas Jefferson said that if there was going to be an official language, it would have been German, because that was the language of science at the time. And so in the absence of these things, what do we have that keeps us together? It's only the aspirational ideal of the Constitution in which we have. And that's why I said it's important for people, in order for this country to survive, to become educated, because we need to understand how we got to where we are. And then when I mention those things that don't that normally bind a society, you have to realize that for the most part, because I was listening to President Shelley mention about the drive for Rotary in order to become a more diverse place. Well, the reality of it is, in the United States, we still primarily lead separate lives. There are two places that we may have the opportunity to engage in meeting people who are not like us, however we define ourselves. One of those places is in a large organization, corporation. So if you're fortunate enough to work for a Nike corporation or work for Intel, you're likely to bump up against a wide range of people. The other place is in institutions of higher education. We get to meet people who are not like us. This might be the first time that we meet somebody who's gay. This might be the first time that we meet somebody who's a Muslim. This might be the first time that we meet someone who's poor or rich. It is only within higher education that that happens. And so thereby the importance of higher education cannot be overstressed within the context of what do we do outside of what we're doing right now. It is wonderful to be able to share knowledge and information about history or science or mathematics or engage in discourse, but what we miss is the ability to engage in community, the ability to get a chance to learn to one another. I'm still upset with Facebook, not because of its the recent scandal about Facebook. I'm upset with Facebook because Facebook has robbed an entire generation and future generations of something that I had the experience of having in higher education. When I went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, I did not know who my roommate was until I got into the room. And you know that that is the history of Facebook. It was designed for you to know who your roommate was coming into college at Harvard University. And so when I got to the room, his name was Jeff. Jeff was a self-described, I'm not describing him like this, but was a self-described redneck. I came from inner city Philadelphia. I had never met anybody like Jeff. I didn't know people who chewed tobacco. He didn't know people who put lotion on their skin. That's a real thing, you know. It was a chance for us to get to know each other. I learned so much more being in Western Pennsylvania and Jeff. We got a chance to share and talk about so many things. Whereas what we do now is that we not only select in, we exclude out. Because when we go to choose our roommates, when we go to choose who we interact with, heck, we even do this with our news stations. We only chose those things that reinforce what we already think, believe, and know, which to me is defeating the purpose of higher education, because education is designed to challenge you. And then when we find ourselves within an era of a pandemic, all of that gets exposed. And it gets exposed to what the real nature of higher education is. Because one of the things I've come to appreciate as the president of Linfield University is that we are often the only place where students get 3 meals a day. There's food insecurity out there. When I went to school, we had a home in a school address. There are certain students here that this is their address. They don't have a home in the school. They've been kicked out of their school. I'm thinking about one particular person. The family came from a certain theological framework. They did not like the fact that their child preferred same-sex partners. And so they got kicked out. They have no home to go to. So school is their home. We're the only place where a significant amount of the population gets health care, because everybody at school has to have a health care plan. We're the only place where students get a chance to have access to reliable internet and the tools to access that internet. Think about this for a second, the luxury of space. Imagine living in a household of 6 people and you're trying to do your homework and do your assignments. And then you have your siblings that are there. If you're fortunate enough to have parents who have the option of working at home, then you're competing with space for them. You have to have enough space to do that. This ideal of online education for our students is the ultimate expression of luxury and privilege, because I have students who are sitting in Alaska trying to use this flip phone, trying to do courses over the internet. We are a large social service agency operating within the context of providing an educational mission. Is that what we do is so much more than education. And then how that comes to be, as I think about Linfield, because last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, I'm sorry, one of the things that gets proven in the era of a pandemic is that Einstein is right, that time is relative. And so I lose track of days because they run from one into another. We don't realize how much the weekends and work and going to work and going home structures our day. I don't do that anymore because all my time is spent doing this. And so I lose track of days. So I was trying to remember back to the 20th. The 20th is when we sent students home. We sent students home to finish the rest of the semester. They did not go home the entire time that they were here. We had less than 10 cases of COVID on campus. People said, how are you doing that? You know, and so for the record, but for those of you who are mathematically inclined, we had about 1,300 students on campus. There's about 2,000 students at Linfield University. We had 1,300 on campus. The less than 10 that we have represent 0.006% of the population. And how did we do that? Because students took care of one another. And as I shared earlier in the group that I was in, I actually have some shocking news for some of you who are parents. It's that your children don't want to be home with you 24/7. They'd rather be with their friends at colleges and universities. And so, well, by the way, I did hear from some parents who begged us to keep their kid here too. So that's another conversation. And so they stayed here and they did the right thing. And we made sure we did as much as we could, but it wasn't the same, but we did as much as we could. We did outside tents. We tested every student who came. We did all that we could to keep students. We did events that allowed them social distancing. One of the things I love about being here, even though I came from the beautiful Shenandoah Valley, but being here in the Pacific Northwest is gorgeous. In September, even going into early October, it's beautiful weather here. So we did outdoor movies. I believe that drive-ins are coming back. Invest in stock that do drive-in. I'm giving you a hint for today. There are opportunities that we did things outdoors that made it socially enabling. These are the things that students want. We think about higher education often within the context of that's a good school because it teaches well. That may or may not be true. But what I have come to understand is that what students want is community. They want to be in interaction with one another. They want to learn from one another. It's something about attending a football game. For the record, I have to keep on putting this plug in because people seem to forget this in Oregon, that Linfield has the winningest football team in all of collegiate history. The last time we lost the game, Eisenhower was president. So you keep on talking about OSU and University of Oregon. You need to talk about Linfield more because we have 64 winning years of football. There's something about attending that. There's something about going to the theater. There's something about listening to a chorus sing that happens. It's the extracurricular activities that make it special. And that's how Linfield has managed to keep students safe because they want to experience those things. We've adapted, we've changed. And this has to do with the rest of higher education and why it's so important for both educational leaders to think different, but for also our society to think differently about education. And so let me start from the societal thinking about education. And this will be as I begin to wrap up and give you time to ask questions. Is that, and I believe that universities and colleges have done this to themselves because we're having this conversation in this country, which for the record, I don't mind telling you, I totally disagree with, about free education. It's amazing to me how expensive free things really are. But the ideal that education should be free is that it has to be paid for in some way. But that is because colleges and universities have priced themselves and balanced their budgets on the backs of students. And so now they have to justify their value to people. And people are saying that they can't afford to attend. If you look at the results of the last election, I'm not stepping into politics, I'm getting into analytics, is that the biggest divide in this country isn't about black and white. The biggest divide in this country is along social economic lines and educational access. Now, how do I reconcile those two? I'm not saying about free college and tuition, is because colleges and universities have to look at their cost structure and what it is that they offer and what is their value proposition and how do they make that work. Because education is indeed transformative. My father went to 9th grade. My mother dropped out of school in 12th grade. I was born in inner city Philadelphia. And so here's the choice that society is often faced with. I could cost the taxpayers of Pennsylvania, where I grew up, I can cost them about $55,000 a year to keep me in jail. Because when you don't have economic opportunities, sometimes you turn to those things that will still allow you to feed your family, and there are often things that are not lawful. Or we can invest in people and have me pay as much as taxes in order to be a part of society that's transformative. It allows you to reach and stretch. But again, that's not just about a job. It's about how to think and envision yourself and doing something different. It is important for us to have a common frame of reference. It's important for us to be able to discuss whether it's Alice in Wonderland or whether it's Descartes or whether it's Aristotle, which I heard people talking about politics. It's important for us to have a common conversation, even as we expand that conversation. It's transformative because it transforms the way in which you think. And then leadership has to think about its institutions, because the reality of it is, as we talk in this area of diversity, equity, inclusion, institutions like Linfield were never meant to have students like me in it, more or less me be their president. What do I mean by that? It's because we're in the state of Oregon, and I assume that you know Oregon's history. So thereby, I could not even be in the state after sundown at one point in this history. You may say that that's a long time ago, but you have to realize that structures are put in place that reflect that time. And sometimes they carry over to the future. So we're not talking about people being racist or people trying to keep people separated, but we're talking about the systemic impact of these things that happen. And so thereby, we have to think differently in education. So how do we reach out to students? And so our biggest increase is among first generation students. Is that we're going out into rural communities as well as inner city neighborhoods and intentionally sought out those whose parents didn't attend college, which is really interesting for Linfield because 18% of Linfield's population are legacy students. And so thereby, but we have to make sure that we're creating opportunities so that we can eliminate and break down this divide. That is why education is so transformative, because while there are plenty of jobs that you can get without education, let me be clear. I'm thankful for my car mechanic. You know, as I rode in from the airport yesterday, I saw the trucks on the road and the truck drivers. I'm thankful for all these people. But I'm also very clear that if you look at the jobs that have been created, and again, let me be clear, education isn't just about jobs. But if you look at the jobs that have been created, overwhelmingly those jobs require some type of post-secondary education in order to go forward. And again, I want to emphasize that it's not just about the jobs, it's about creating a place where our democracy, our democratic republic can thrive. And I want to stop there because there's so much where I can go, but I'm limited on time. I want to answer your question. I'm more interested in hearing your questions than having me talk at you. So I cannot open up the chat. I unfortunately downloaded the new update to Mac, and it slows down on Zoom, so it makes it hard to open. So if someone wants to read those questions off, I'll be happy to address and answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, President Davis. Not to worry, we will ask the questions of you. You don't need to look in the chat. And you are correct. We have a myriad of questions, a queue lined up. So I'm going to call on them as we go. First up is Rotarian AJ Barnett. AJ?
Thank you, President Davis. My name is AJ Barnett. I've been a member of this club for 12 years, and the year I joined this club was also the year I stepped off a university campus. So I have not been out of higher education for that long, and I couldn't agree more with everything you said about the real point of education is developing our citizenry, and I gather from the totality of your comments that the higher education system has a lot of accountability in really where that message has been lost. And I don't know whether it's a matter of decades or centuries, but that is not where we're at today. So how do we begin change? And so I have two parts to this question. How does that change begin? And what could Rotary do if somebody like you was able to ask an organization as big as Rotary? I'm sure you know how big Rotary is, and the influential people that are part of our organization. what could Rotary do about it? Because we are action oriented, and this is something that if someone like you was to say, here's what could be done, I think a lot of people could get behind it. So.
Well, AJ, I thank you for your confidence. Believe that my voice is that powerful. I actually do have a perspective that might be worth considering. Is that Rotary has an incredible scholarship program. It brings people from overseas and it sends people overseas. I think that if you emphasize citizenship, something we don't even talk about anymore. You know, they took all the civics classes. So maybe that you award scholarships based upon civic engagement. Now, I'm not talking about the newfound thing where everybody has to do a certain amount of community service hours and they do that, because that belongs to people who actually have privilege. I sit on a certain number of scholarship committees and I had them take that as a criteria because I had to work to support my family while I was in high school. So I didn't get a chance to be a member of the Key Club and all that other stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are people who believe, you know what I mean, AJ? And so what I'm talking about, people who believe in citizenship. I'm talking about people who believe in citizenship and who are interested in making and changing society, not people who are just looking to get a job, but Rotary supported students and young people who wanted to study things that are important to our society, such as history. It drives me crazy. I did a survey and I'm having this conversation here. So again, I'm not saying that Linfield isn't faultless in this because the educational process has failed them. I have news for your audience, for everybody out there. There are less than 3% of the so-called liberal arts institutions in this country require US and world history. Less than 3% require it as part of the general education requirement. Exactly, AJ. And so if you can support students who have an interest in history, who have an interest in these things, because it is important for us as citizens to continue to move our country forward, I think that is something that the Rotary can get behind because it already has a great scholarship program. And the principles of Rotary, you wrote the 4-part test. That is a basis to build an incredible society if we, the 4-part test, and that we get, you know, unfortunately we find ourselves in an era where it's okay to engage in ad hominem attacks against people. For those of you who I'm not trying to impress you with my Latin, it's just that it's really what it is. It's in rhetoric. Ad hominem is all you're doing is attacking the individual, as opposed to looking and being able to deconstruct the argument. So this is what we should be celebrating and host up and invite those types of people to come speak that actually have time to think and think about society. Does that help any, AJ?
Absolutely. Those are really great answers and really concrete. And I happen to be a history major and a lawyer, so I love everything you said. So thank you.
I didn't know that. I didn't prime the pump with him. I didn't know that was his background. It's just I really believe it.
Well, you were spot on, President Davis. Our next question comes from Rotarian Wes Harper. Wes?
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for your presentation, and congratulations on how successful Linfield has been. Actually, my question is related to what you just said. And I must confess, I also was a history major. My question is, I see that higher education is facing a dilemma in that in many circles, it's seen as less and less relevant, particularly in an economic sense, and overpriced. But on the other hand, I see the need more and more for what a liberal education provides. You mentioned history. I think that this is just my personal opinion, that the leaders of our country have appeared to be woefully unfamiliar with history, or at least don't learn from it. And certainly ethics, all the things that can be included in a liberal education seem to be needed in government, in private enterprise. And I just, my question is, there is a question here, is do you see a way of resolving this dilemma?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you asked this question, and you have to, I would encourage you to also ask this question from the other end of the spectrum. Why is it that some people are so vested in saying that education is no longer needed? Ask that question. Because there are those who like to keep people uninformed and unable to engage in critical thinking and analysis. I think that we have to change the conversation. And so to the extent that universities have shot themselves in the foot is because they tout, and quite frankly, it's become the standard. And we do the same thing. I'm not saying that we're faultless here. I'm not, ye without sin cast the first stone. Is that we talk about our job placement, our success, and our economic, we talk about it in economic terms, so that's how people could begin to think about universities. But there is a reason that institutions like Linfield has the highest placement rate and the highest income of graduates. It's not because they've learned the job better, they've learned to think and solve problems better. So we have to position education as the ability to solve and integrate knowledge than as a place just to go get a job. And part of that, quite frankly, is language. Language changes, unfortunately. And I realized I was in trouble when I came here, when a gentleman met me on the street and says, you're the president of that liberal arts institution in town. And I'm like, okay, yes. He says, well, tell me where the conservative arts institutions are. And that's how we think about it. We don't think about liberal from freedom. We think about it as liberal is in terms of policies. And quite frankly, some of the institutions shot themselves in the foot because we moved into, and that's why I started out talking about indoctrination versus education. My opinion should not be discussed in the classroom. Quite frankly, when I teach a class, what I spend time is, no matter what perspective you take, I'm going to take the opposing argument to test your thinking. And so we have done a lot of damage to ourselves. And so thereby it makes it hard. I can't tell you the countless number of times where I've had to have this conversation with people say, well, you undermine this and you're saying this about that. That's not our job. Our job is to teach people how to think. And we have to begin, and having this conversation is part of it. So I unabashedly embrace the ideal that we should be able to think differently. However, I want you to make better arguments of your different thinking. You can't just come up to me and say, that's a dumb ideal. You can't call me a libtard. You can't call me a racist Republican. Give me your argument. And if you can't give me your argument, then go back to school and learn how to do it better.
Thank you, President Davis. I'm going to give one last question. Scott Burns, you're going to be quick, and then we're heading it back to President Ruth.
Okay. And I'll answer quick. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much again for a great talk. I agree with you on many points, but one especially, building community, something that I've done with my undergrad program for 50 years of teaching. How do you think a university should build community for their students?
Understand what we have in common and focus more on that as opposed to what divides us. You build that you're here to better and develop your thinking in your life, build communities, find people you share things with, and then challenge people. Because one of the challenges of my life, and I go back to my experience with Jeff, if however you are, however you define yourself, I encourage you as part of your educational experience to get to know people who are not like you. That's how we build community.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And I wish we had time for more. These were all great questions, but that was a particularly great one on which to end. Next week, we'll hear from Alan Evans and Raven Russell from the Bybee Lakes Hope Center. I've heard Alan speak before, and you don't want to miss this presentation. Our meeting will once again be live via Zoom at noon on Tuesday. Today, I want to thank our virtual guests, especially Jaziel Ormeno, Michael Castro, and Reid's cat. We're so glad you all joined us. Carol, thank you for your reflection. And past President Cade, thank you for facilitating the process of club leadership nominations. Scott, thank you as always for launching our Red Kettle Drive and for your enthusiastic introduction of Dr. Davis. Finally, Miles, thank you for your thought-provoking presentation about new priorities for higher education. As a fellow Rotarian, we appreciate your reference to the four-way test, always a great guide for life. Now, as we enter into a new Rotary week, please join me in opening the doors of opportunity for healing, for recovery, and for peace building. As Rotarians, we're here to make our world healthier, more sustainable, and with justice for all. Have a great week, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned.